Hello and welcome to the Bubb Report. Last week, public sector workers in Grenada from across several trade union organizations protested on the streets of the capital, St. George's, in a public plea that urged the government of Grenada to restore their constitutionally guaranteed right to a pension upon retirement. The protest action previewed a constitutional motion brought against the state by the public sector unions, which challenges the validity of the 1983 National Insurance Act as the basis for administering public worker pensions and other retirement benefits. The plaintiffs are arguing that there is legal precedent for public sector workers based on the 1997 judgment in McQueen versus the Public Service Commission, which ruled that every public officer is constitutionally entitled to pension benefits in accordance with the Pensions Act, Capt 233.
What we want the world to understand is that there is an issue that tantamounts to being the greatest socio-economic genocide that this country has ever faced, which is the depriving of public officers of a pension and gratuity.
This pension matter is extremely important. I can tell you that even if there are not any police officers here on the demonstration has officially passed, they are very concerned. And I am sure that they are concerned and they want the pension too. Comrades, the retired nurses, the doctors, the maids, the orderlies, the cleaners, they all need their pension.
For the government's part, they maintain that public officers are only entitled to pension benefits under the National Insurance Act for officers who entered the service after February 22, 1985. In a memorandum of understanding between the trade unions and the state, the government committed to enhancing these benefits received under the National Insurance Act to ensure that no public officer went home with a pension of less than 70%. Here is the Prime Minister making this very point in 2019.
No government in the last 30 years has attempted to deal with this problem. This is the first government. And this is the first government that has agreed on pension. The issue is not pension anymore, you know. The issue is advance payment to the pension that we have all agreed to.
On July 13th, Trinidad and Tobago lost one of its preeminent rhythm poets and musicians. Masimba, who went by the sobriquet Brother Resistance, was one of the fathers of the Rapso genre of music, developed in the 60s and 70s at the height of the Black Power resistance movements that swept the Twin Island Republic. Rapso, a hybrid of calypso and rap, is essentially protest music that has the power of the word and the rhythm of the word.
The poetry of calypso, that Rapso is the power of the word in the rhythm of the word, the power of the word in the rhythm of the word. We just talk with a certain kind of twang, and we express the poetic emotion in that twang. And then when we blend the rhythms of the voice with the rhythm of the drums of skin, the first natural instrument created by man on earth, and the rhythm of the drums of steel, the last natural instrument created by man on earth, right here in Trinidad and Tobago. That synthesis is what we call the Rapso rhythm. And this is the music that we come forward with. We say Rapso is like, you know, just the voice of the people in the heart of the struggle.
Janine Mendez, writing in Global Voices last week, said, quote, "Brother Resistance was much more than an artistic icon. He was a fount of cultural knowledge, unquote. Joining us to pay tributes to Brother Resistance are Caribbean cultural icon David Michael Rudder and music producer Professor Martin Raymond of the University of Trinidad and Tobago. We also welcome our panel for today's discussion on pensions and gratuity. Jude Bartholomew, the president of the Grenada Union of Teachers. Ewart Lane, formerly of the People's Revolutionary Army. Daisy Hazard, public relations officer of the Grenada Public Workers Union, and actuary Chantel Maguire of Maguire Risk and Investment Services Limited. It's the week of July 18th, 2021. We thank you for joining us. A pleasant good morning, good evening, good night, good day to everyone who is joining us for another episode of the Bubb Report. Certainly let me apologize for the late start as we were having some technical difficulties. But, this week, for the first segment of this program, I really wanted to pay tribute to Brother Resistance because growing up in Grenada, I always heard Brother Resistance's music on radio. I grew up on radio because we did not have a television set in the country in Pomrose at the time. And so Trinidadian radio was one of those radio stations that we always listened to. And Brother Resistance struck me as a person who was steeped in history, steeped in culture, and steeped in the tradition. Now, one of the things that he said back in February this year was that if people do not know their history, they would be in a serious state of distress, and they don't know that they're in a state of distress. When you look at the power that came out of the Black Power era, he goes on to talk about, every block had a drumming organization. So youths would turn to drums and not to guns. Every community had a business, and the community could support that. It is in that spirit that I wish to welcome Assistant Professor Martin Raymond of the University of Trinidad and Tobago, who's also a recording artist who actually also recorded with Brother Resistance. He recorded some of his music, as well as David Michael Rudder. We are very excited to have you here, sir. Good morning to you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Gentlemen, welcome. We are meeting under some very sad circumstances here on the Bubb Report. Certainly, Brother Resistance, as I said in the opening, was a preeminent cultural icon. And so, Martin, I would begin with you. You had the chance to work with him in the process of recording his music and developing his genre. So can you reflect on his passing? Professor Raymond?
Yeah, well, I first really encountered Brother Resistance when I was about 15 or 16 years old. I'd gone to, this was in the late 1970s, maybe 78, I think. I had gone to a show at City Hall, and these guys came out on stage doing a whole new style of music. It was similar to what Lancelot Lane had been doing. I don't think it even had a name as yet, and they had this song called Dancing Shoes. This idea of stand firm for your culture. And at the time, Trinidad was in the middle of a sort of a disco revolution, and the whole talking now was about going to the disco, etc. And the song was very much a critique of that idea of that young persons were ignoring their homegrown culture and gravitating towards American culture. It was like nothing I'd ever really heard before. It wasn't calypso. In fact, it was, and stylistically, it was almost like functor waves built in this kind of funky bass line. Even though it was poking fun at it. And I knew right there and then that this was the future of the music of Trinidad and Tobago. And at that moment, I said, I have to work with these guys. In fact, only a few years previously, I had made up my mind to become a professional musician, and I had no idea when or where. And I eventually got my chance about 10 years later when I met Brother Resistance in England. And I worked closely with him on 2 albums in England and another 2 albums back in Trinidad. I think he's quite a remarkable figure, very much forged his own path. Very, very original, very, very focused. It was a real pleasure to work with him. Work with him over the years. He was very much a game changer and a visionary. I also toured with him extensively in Europe. did shows in many of the major cities. And I think many people in the Caribbean aren't aware of how huge he was in Europe and how well received. Maybe we might start to see more footage coming out now, you know?
Yeah. And now, Professor Raymond, I think you also go by a nickname. I'm trying to remember the nickname you go by that folks call you.
It was Mice.
But Mice. There we go, Mice. That's right, Mice. But in doing research for having you on this morning, we found that Resistance produced more than a dozen albums under the Rapso genre. We're talking about tracks like Never Ever Worry, a remix of Lord Pretender's original work, right? We're talking about songs like Can't Take That, Dancing Shoes, and of course the seminal Ring the Bell, which again, is etched into the cultural memory of the Caribbean. Now, what role did you play in helping to craft some of these seminal selections?
Well, I have to make a side correction. I'm not a recording artist by any stretch of the imagination. I'm a record producer, and
you're a producer. Thanks for that correction.
In the background. So yes. So when I first worked with Resistance, was I believe on the album for Rapso Lovers, which had things like Can't Take That and Whatnot, and a version of Ring the Bell. He had started the album in Trinidad, and we did additional work on it in London. And that stage, I was more primarily engineering, editing. But the album after that, which is Touch the World with Rapso, together myself and Brother Resistance were very much the producers on that, and things like Our Mother Earth, Middle Passage, Crucial Decision came out of that. I think at some point Resistance had relocated to Trinidad. I myself also came back to Trinidad in the 90s. We had also worked on the Rapso Explosion album with things like Rock the Colonial Order, etc. And also we did the Pretender and Resistance Never Ever Worry, which was actually Resistance's idea. He more or less sort of produced that track and tapped me to work on it. And in fact, I was telling some colleagues of mine that was one of the most fun experiences of my life, working with the great Pretender as well. You know, he hadn't really encountered much of the modern technology, and he was amazed that I could take his voice and put it anywhere in the song, and how we could take the horns from the old record and use them, etc. And he had a lot of fun making that record, and Resistance also made sure everyone involved had a great deal of fun, you know. So in some ways, I think when I met Resistance, the thing about it, he was very open to ideas and going in different directions musically, and was always willing to experiment, always willing to try things. I think I always had a bit of a reputation of someone being a non-traditionalist. I have to say, other guests, King David Rudder is very much of the same ilk, and I think we work together under similar circumstances. So Calypso tends to be very, very conservative in my. I think of Calypso and soca as always a bit like Nashville in the US. It's very, very conservative, and if you do anything too different or step out, everyone starts to, oh, you can't do this.
That norm, right?
Everyone starts to kind of panic.
But David, welcome to the Bubb Report. But you also deviated from that norm of the traditional, conservative nature of Calypso by also producing several Rapso songs. And tell us, how did Brother Resistance influence your desire to produce Rapso music?
Well, I don't think it's just simply Brother Resistance. I think it started from Lancelot Lane. That's my first connection with Rapso. And I also felt that the 70s was a time of change. The 70s produced disco, soca, Rapso. Bradley had a style called funk kaiso. So the 70s was a time of just not political and social change, but it was reflected in the music. And but Resistance was part of that movement, along with I always felt it's part of all of us. What I do was a bit different, but in a sense it was the same, because it was part of that revolution that never really deviated. And some people say, well, it will kill calypso, but it actually added to the calypso vibration, and it's so funny that there's one of my songs that I needed a bell, and I got Resistance to come to the studio and bring his bell to play on my track, So it might be something very simple, but it was there's something very deep about that also, that here's this cross, how should I say, these patterns of this new musical revolution, coming together, but in a different way, Because I'm not doing what Resistance is doing, but at the same time, it is part of what it is part of that whole that progression towards, and this new song that emerged from the 70s.
And the bell. So to talk to us about the significance of the bell, which again has its origins in that spiritual Baptist, that Orisha Afro-syncretic tradition, which in many respects in the Caribbean it's still shunned. In some quarters you hear these negative things about Baptists and Orisha people. So talk to us about the significance of the bell in Rapso music.
Well, it is a clarion call for those who are not paying attention. In school, when the headmaster rings the bell, the entire school has to shut up. Okay. That means the school is on now. Everybody stand to attention, hands up, hands out. Sit for 1 minute with silence, just because of that one bell that the principal rang, So it was always had that kind of energy about it. But at the same time, the Baptist faith was so strong within, especially urban Trinidad, and the bell would cause people to, as we say, wheel and tumble. They get in that trance, and it's just a sign of who's in command here. There's a funny story. One time I took when Ring the Bell was just released, I was doing a tour of Jamaica, and I got to Jamaica and I gave them this is some new stuff from Trinidad, and they were playing some of this new stuff, and then he put on Resistance song, and every time he said, "Ring the bell for freedom, ring the bell for justice." It's like I threw a hand grenade in the room, because everybody scattered, and the police took the song off one time, because apparently one of the political parties in Jamaica, their symbol is a bell, so it came over like, if this song is supporting this particular party. So it was a mad scramble to pull the record off. So I was innocently just saying here that we're sharing some music from Trinidad to Jamaica, and not knowing that that one little song caused a lot of confusion on your decision that morning.
Now, I want to segue into a conversation about the locationality, the geographical location from which Brother Resistance emerged. That East Dry River area of Port of Spain, East Port of Spain, essentially, which gets a bad rap for issues of crime. But East Port of Spain produced a lot of seminal artists. We're talking about, for example, Singing Sandra.
Right.
Who also, was born and raised in that East Port of Spain area, and who produced music, that speaks to, the cry of the working poor, who speaks to the cry of the people. Resistance also comes from that area. So what is it about that part of Port of Spain, or maybe that socio-economic sector of Trinidad and Tobago that was amenable to producing artists like that?
Well, it's almost like an international vibe, because most of the time you hear powerful music, it's done where the pain is. That's where it comes from, every place which we call the ghetto or what have you, that is where the creativity really comes to the fore. I remember the Blackstreet Rhythm Band with Emo. He came from that Laventry, Jaja, the drummer. So it's always like, out of that muddy pond, as the song says, 10,000 flowers bloom.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even your song, "Laventille, Here We Come," right? That is a song that I grew up on. But Professor Raymond, same thing, same question. What is it about certain communities that produces these kinds of artists?
No, well, as King David said, and this has been the story of popular music of the 20th century. It has always come from the street. It's always come from the ghetto. Even in post-war England, what we talk about rock and roll, all of that, Beatles, everything that all of that actually came from poverty. But just to get back to a second, that has always been the kind of engine room of creativity all over the world, and no different in terms of Trinidad, Pan, Kaiso, everything came from that east port of Spain, Belmont area as well. But interesting enough with that, as you mentioned, you ring the bell. What was always amazing to me in touring with resistance in Europe is how that concept resonated with European audiences. When he brought out that bell, the audience would go crazy, and you would tell them, "Do you people know this bell?" The idea of when a bell rings, just assemble the people. Everyone could relate that idea of the ringing of a school bell. So even within European culture, that idea of ringing the bell to assemble the people was like a major thing. And something I was just kind of pointing out the other day. I know nowadays we see lots of protest movements and different things happening all over the world, and it's even led some people to think that things are getting worse and not better. But as I was pointing out to people the other day, like when I started working with resistance in London in 1980s, when he said ring that bell for freedom and for justice, that was a revolutionary act. South Africa was still under apartheid. Nelson Mandela was still in solitary confinement in South Africa. America itself was only a few decades past segregation. And in fact, England was one of the only holdouts in the Commonwealth against sanctions on South Africa. So when resistance right through Europe to pull out that bell and said, ring the bell for freedom, ring the bell for justice, this was a very real clarion call. It wasn't just words. They were still not less than anything that's happening now worldwide, but there was still very serious injustice on issues, particularly affecting persons of African descent. And this has become part of that whole thing to breaking down that structure of apartheid. Yeah.
And Brother Rudder, you wanted to add anything to what Professor just said?
I was just going to add that I worked with Super Blue on his first record, Soca Baptist, and we also had to ring a bell in that. And he was saying in the song, he was going all right until the man started ringing bell, and that is when he got the spirit and the energy through the song. That song that affected him so much. That's the story that was told. But I was also had the privilege of being the bell ringer on that recording too, apart from singing background vocals and so on. So when he said until the man started ringing bell, I started ringing this bell. It was like that was a one take session, and everything just felt right, and it came and it went, and it was done, and the rest is history. But it's funny as we talking. I remember, but it started to get a strange kind of power just after the bell was rung, And he's saying I started balling, that's when he, as we say, catchy power. So, a bell is such a powerful instrument, a weapon, a divider, and a peacemaker, a tension getter. Like it's all these things in one little instrument, a little gong that you use in your hand. It's very interesting.
Yeah, and gentlemen,
very deeply. Sorry.
Go ahead, Professor.
No, I was just saying it's very deeply connected to the whole African diaspora, that African culture. When I say, look, even in terms of early rock and roll, when Chuck Berry spoke about it, Johnny B. Good playing the guitar like ringing a bell. People have to understand the significance of that line and where that music came from. That what they were doing on those guitars was a modern version of that of ringing that bell. So it's a connection that goes deep in the culture, and this is one thing I think resistance really did was at a time. You have to remember at the time it was not fashionable to wear dreadlocks. It was
Correct.
not fashionable to change your name to an African name, or to dress, or take a conscious decision to even dress an African way. I still remember as a young child, I have to say, my mother was very much kind of revolutionary in these aspects. She used to go about in dashikis and get laughed at in the streets. I remember me and my brother we were one of the first kids in Trinidad to have afros. Our hair was all out here. We used to call it fat head. And we used to get abuse in the streets. And that's my memory as a young child. So what resistance did there was very revolutionary in raising consciousness and almost making it cool. Like even I see you wearing the big beads. Resistance was the first person I ever saw with that. I would say that if anything, he made that popular. He was rocking that in the 1970s, you know.
And for me personally, it was an evolution, right? Because growing up, I went to Resistance attended QRC in Port of Spain, which again, you know, it's an elite high school. Similarly, I attended an elite high school, Presentation College in Grenada, which, you know, they have these very strict deportment standards, if you will, right? Which again steeped in colonialism. But in Grenada, for me, it was an evolution with the dreads and the beads. I wear this for all of my shows. I wear this all over, and I've come to embrace it as part of my African consciousness. But it is because of artists like Resistance, you know, who have really brought this home. You know, Mother singing Sandra as well, David Rudder, yourself. But as we go to the next segment, I want to say one of the things that Resistance was concerned about was the preservation of the cultural legacy. Similarly with Singing Sandra, this year in Trinidad and Tobago, you've lost several giants. You've lost a composer, you've lost an artist in Brother Resistance, you've also lost Mother singing Sandra. A couple of the older heads are also ailing. How do we ensure that there is that cultural transmission, that generational cultural transmission, to ensure that that legacy continues into the consciousness of successive generations? David?
Oh, first of all, just like to add my condolences to the family of Godwin Bowen, steel band arranger, music director, who passed yesterday. Mm-hmm. So another branch of the tree has given way, you know. Mm-hmm. I just feel that we have to keep doing the music. I would say keep doing the work. We can't force people into anything, but I think if we keep doing the work and keep that focus on giving some talking about ourselves and how our history and why we're here at this point in time, I think that's all we as artists can do. Hopefully there are others who can say, give people, I think we introduce history as something very powerful in our society, because history today is like nothing in Trinidad, especially, you know, like a lot of people don't know anything, you know. Before when we were growing up, my used to tell you, we were like sponges for knowledge and things about ourselves. We were part of this story, you know. I hear people saying, well, we don't teach the children nothing, but my parents never taught me anything about what was going on in Trinidad society. I was just part of that Belmont University. Mm-hmm. Every block was a classroom, you know, everything. So it was part of something that is natural. You just absorb knowledge as you're going along. Now everything is, well, as life deteriorates into kind of a 10-second attention span, you know, we have some problems, but I think at the end of the day, we just have to keep doing the work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, keep doing the work. Professor Raymond?
Yeah, well, I would add to that. The large extent, particularly in terms of my teaching at UTT, even though my field is sound engineering, history is so critical to our development. And what I try to really awaken in my students a real sense of history, like a sense of what the Caribbean has contributed to even modern music production, whether it's Jamaica, the role of Calypso, etc. I think I was fortunate to grow up in a household. My grandfather was a journalist, my mother was a librarian, and she was part of that cultural revolution in the 1950s in the Caribbean. So everyone from Beryl McBurney was a close personal friend. Minchell, Derek Walcott, Astor Johnson, Nye Paul, Selvon. These were the people I kind of cross paths with or grew up with, or would be in the house linemen and old talking. So I was sort of exposed to all of that, and I really tried to get that across. On the other thing, what I impress upon my students, which is music students, other music producers, I've worked in many genres of music all over the world, and one thing that always struck me in working in other genres of music is how much of an understanding and a respect for the history that they have. I've been on rock and roll sessions, and before they start, somebody will pull up a guitar. I was like, hey, you remember this song from the Beatles or the Rolling Stones or Elvis or something like that? I've been on hip-hop sessions where basically if you don't know the 3 foundation songs of hip-hop, they will throw you out of the studio. Same thing in Jamaica. And it's something I find lacking here. In Trinidad. In fact, it's only on being in sessions, I say, with David and persons like Robin Foster, where you would get this kind of history. But we generally tend to have our memory seems to go back to last year. Yeah, what did we do last year? And I was always struck by this in working other genres of music. I mean, I've worked with techno guys, EDM guys, who will do the same thing, put up a guitar, and I remember this song from the 70s. What about this one from the 1960s? They all have this depth of this knowledge of where the music came from. And this is something also Resistance was trying to do. Even though he was doing a modern style, it was deeply connected to the roots of the music. There was no about, this is what was did last year. Let's go further back. So that is very much the mission, keep doing the work, but also spread the knowledge of where it came from.
Gentlemen, thank you again for appearing. It's much appreciated. I will be producing a special program in honor of Brother Resistance. You know, and I say to people, we ought not to wait until these gems, or until our musical icons and cultural icons pass away to pay tribute to them. I think it's important that we give people flowers when they're alive. And I would always pay respect to you, both Professor Raymond, your role, and David Rudder, your role as well. You know, we have a crisis happening in Haiti, and what comes to mind? Haiti, I'm sorry, right? that is a song that is etched in the cultural memory of the Caribbean. So, Brother David, before you leave, can you give us a freestyle? I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but can you give us a freestyle maybe in honor of Brother Resistance?
To say was a mighty man, and to make matters worse, he was black. Black back in the days when black men knew their place was in the bag. But this rebel still walked through Napoleon, who thought it wasn't very nice. And so today, my brothers in Haiti, they still pay the price. Yeah. Haiti, I'm sorry. We misunderstood you. One day we'll turn our heads and look inside you. Haiti, I'm sorry. Yeah. Haiti, I'm sorry. But one day we'll turn our heads, restore the glory. La vie pour tout le monde.
All right. Brother David, thank you so much. Professor Raymond, thank you, gentlemen, for appearing on the Bubb Report. And whenever we have other cultural programming, we will be certainly reaching out to you, gentlemen, as great resources of the art form. So thank you again, folks. Stand by. We will go to the next segment, but on our way out, we'll play some Ring the Bell from Brother Resistance.
have a story to tell. Well, it's a long, long time now we fighting for freedom. Victory bound to come. Assemble the people, recite up the mission, let we rock the Rapso rhythm. Whoa, ring the bell, ring the bell. Ring the bell down there. Ring the bell, ring the bell. Ring the bell down there. Ring the bell for justice. Ring the bell down there. Ring the bell for culture. Ring the bell down there. Ring the bell for freedom. Ring the bell down there. I said to ring up the bell for the Rapso rhythm. Ring the bell down there. Ring it all over. Ring it all over. Ring it all over. Ring it all over. Hey. So listen well, I come to deliver this word.
At the end of the day, what we are seeking to find is a pathway, a solution in terms of having a pension for publics. Under the NIS Act, sections 46, I believe 47, government, it provided for government to have had an additional pension, something different for public officers, because it's true that what the NIS provides is not comparable to what we were getting in our time, because we got our NIS and we got our state pension. And so I believe what government is seeking to do is to give effect to that sections 46 and 47. And we asking the unions to the table. Let us discuss as we have been accustomed to, and let us find that solution. Staying away is not the answer. And as I said, what we need now are some creative thinkers. What it is that we can do, what it is that we can agree on. So if somebody dies before 12 and a half years, what it is that you could ask government to put in place so that the estate can have a little something. We are asking them to come back around the table where we have been accustomed, and let us find that solution.
That was Ms. Beryl Isaac, retired public servant and the chair of the Government Pensions Committee in Grenada. And I want to take this opportunity to welcome the panel, Mr. Jude Bartholomew, who is the president of the Grenada Union of Teachers, Ms. Chantal Maguire, who is an actuary, Daisy Hazard, the public relations officer of the Grenada Public Workers Union, and Mr. Ewart Lane, who is a former member of the People's Revolutionary Army of Grenada, the administration under which, of course, the NIS Act was put into force. But I want to begin today by speaking with Chantal. Chantal, you heard Ms. Beryl Isaac there talk about creative solutions to treating to the pension issue. Now, as an actuary, I would begin by asking you, in 2019, Prime Minister Mitchell stated, quote, that at present the NIS will go bankrupt in a few years if we do not increase the retirement age. And in some cases, increase the contribution to NIS per worker. Additionally, the 11th Actuarial Review made two recommendations concerning the sustainability of the NIS pension fund. One, they're proposing that a gradual increase in the pensionable age from 60 to 65 over a period of 16 years, and the implementation of early retirement and late retirement factors. The second recommendation was an increase in the contribution rate by 2% in 2018. Now, this is a dire prediction, and public servants seem to be making these particular demands in an environment where the government might be saying that the fiscal space would not allow them to treat to these demands. As an actuary, what say you?
As an actuary, I've actually been privy to some of the actual reports that have been done in the past on NIS. And I would say that it's very clear in every single report. This has not only been the last one in 2018, but a few others prior to it, that there was a need for the fund to stay sustainable, for NIS scheme to be sustainable, that the contribution rates do need to increase, and the retirement age also needs to increase. And I would start with the reasons why the contribution rates need to be increased. Basically, NIS is a pay-as-you-go system. So basically, the whole nation, everybody in the population, the people who are working, pay for the people who are in retirement. So basically, based on our population statistics, right, we're dealing with a dynamic here. And we're not the only country. I mean, everywhere around the world is having this issue. Most countries are having issues of an aging population. So when you're dealing with a pay-as-you-go system where the working people are supposed to be paying for the retirees, right? And your working population is getting smaller and smaller, you try to find a way in order to make this scheme sustainable by, one, trying to reduce your payouts. So that's why you're kind of increasing the age at which people retire, because people are living longer, which coincidentally means they could work a little longer. They're actually pretty strong at those later ages in life. And I even know some people kind of get bored in retirement if they retire too early, but I mean, everybody has their, what age they would like to retire at. But when it comes to a national scheme as that, which is pay as you go, the number of contributors is one of the most essential things to help the fund be solvent, as well as the number of retirees is also a crucial element, because that's all the expenses that the NIS will face, all the benefits that they pay out. So in order to deal with the changing population dynamics, think of it this way. You work for 40 years and maybe you retire for 15 years in the past. Now that age is growing up, you have to pay for retirement maybe 20, 25 years, depending on how the population is growing. So that does put a lot of strain on the NIS scheme, especially being a pay-as-you-go system. Therefore, it will require, and that's why the actuaries have asked many times in their reports to have the contribution rate increase. Like I was speaking to one actuary just before this program, and they were saying that their sense of NIS or a national scheme is the fact that, we start with a contribution rate, and his goal, it's not my opinion, but his view is the fact that he thinks over the time, you increase the contribution rate till you get to about 20%. And in Canada, those type of systems have a 20% contribution rate. I believe that Dynamics in Grenada is very different. However, based on how young the scheme is and the level of pay-as-you-go contributions we have to date and the change in dynamics, people are not making more children. There's a lot of migration issues in Grenada. If we could figure out a way to get the younger population here and, thriving, that could help us a lot. But at this current state and how the statistics are looking from a long-term projection, it is crucial that we find a way to get our contribution levels up and reduce the expense payout. So that's exactly why those two things are highly recommended by the actuaries in their report.
Now, let me bring in Ms. Hazard and Mr. Bartholomew of the unions. You heard Ms. McGuire. Her position sounds reasonable based on the conditions, the economic conditions that governments are confronted with. what is unreasonable about what she's saying and what the government is proposing? I will start with you, President Bartholomew.
Hi, good morning. It's nice, wonderful being on the show.
Yes.
I did not hear everything that the actuary said because we were having some problems with the internet. So I went off for a while. So it's rather difficult to comment on everything. But basically, as I would say, yes, one would want to make sure that the NIS is stable. One would want to make sure that the NIS has the funds that it needs to pay, the old age benefits and all the probably other benefits that it has to perform. But at the same time, the key of the matter is the legal issue here. What we're saying is that the NIS old age benefit still is not the legal pension for public officers and teachers. And there are a lot of reasons, yes. One may say that you may extend the working age beyond 60. You may increase probably revenue by charging more, whether it's 1% or how many percent. There are a lot of factors that are probably causing the NIS to be in that situation. Public officers and teachers do pay their contributions. What about the other workers, whether private or probably private, that basically collects funds in the various domains, and probably the money doesn't go to the NIS. So you have to look at all those things. You have to look at it, basically the young age. You have to look at the type of employment that young people receive. Some of them basically don't pay NIS, the type of job security that they have and all those things. So it's up to government even to generate this sort of jobs and all those things, even the private sector, so that and to increase probably the working population so that the NIS will be financially sound. But there are a lot of factors involved in that. But in spite of everything, whether the NIS should keep afloat and one wants us for the NIS to keep afloat, it doesn't take away from the fact that the NIS is not basically the legal pension for public officers, and basically is a scheme with equal contribution from both parties. That's the issue, and that's the crux of the matter.
And let us hear from Ms. Hazard. Same question: is the actuaries' forecast here, and again the government's position on this unreasonable?
Good afternoon, Dr. Bubb, panelists, and
yes.
the audience. The report by the comments made by the actuary, there can be no query about it. There is no query about whether or not the NIS is heading into some trouble. I think the projection is that if something does not give by 2036, we'll see some problems. But that's not an issue confronting public workers alone in Grenada. It's a whole of society problem. It's an issue confronting the whole of society. And government as an employer also has a part to play in that, because what we have seen from the union's end in the last number of years, but increasingly so, government employs a number, hundreds of Grenadians on contract terms and does not pay NIS for them. So where you have a national insurance scheme that is saying the pensionable age has to increase, we need more contributions, we may need to increase the contributions. Employers are supposed to pay contributions for the workers, but you have the government of Grenada, the largest employer in the society, the governing body in Grenada, employing people in nefarious ways and not paying NIS contributions for them. So that's one problem. You also have these people who are not even paying NIS contributions. And so the question becomes, what happens to these persons? Should they become sick? What happens to them when they retire? And so NIS needs to approach the government and say, employ people according to the Constitution, according to the rules and regulations of the PSC, so that you can pay NIS benefits for them as well. But it is a question for the entire society. The question confronting public sector workers is a question of the denial of our rightful access to a gratuity and pension after having served the country for many years on retirement age at 60. And that's a very separate and divorced conversation to what's happening with the NIS right now, as Brother Jude said before.
And let me bring in Ms. Selene. Ms. Selene, first of all, welcome to the Bubb Report. And I also have to put in a plug for your book here, We Move Tonight. I had a chance to read your book. It's a very riveting read, and it should be required reading in high school. Regardless of what people think about the merits of the Grenada Revolution, it is Grenadian history that needs to be taught in our schools. But Ms. Selene, welcome to the report.
Good day, good afternoon, Dr. Bubb and all the panelists. Thank you for having me.
Yes, yes. Now, Ms. Elaine, it would appear that we are here with this dispute because of decisions that the People's Revolutionary Government made in 1983 with respect to the National Insurance Act, if you will. So my question is, what was the rationale for disqualifying public servants from a constitutionally entitled pension after April 4th? As it is understood, the point of the act was to invalidate receiving benefits under the Pension Act of 1958. Was this a grave error on the part of the PRG?
Okay. Again, thank you for having me, and I'm very glad you posed the question because, in fact, several years ago, many people asked me that same question, and I decided then to write a series of articles, which I did, and I circulated them publicly. One way of putting it is to say that we are here because of decisions taken by the PRG. Another way of putting it is to say that we are here because of the failure of succeeding regimes to take decisions that they ought to have taken, and that the law which was passed in 1983 established the framework for taking. I followed the comment from the Prime Minister where he said, no government tackled that problem in 30 years. Now, what happened in 1983 is that the NIS was set up, as you know, it was established and came into effect from April the 4th, 1983. In fact, NIS is nothing unique to Grenada. You have it all over the Caribbean. In fact, it started in the Caribbean, Jamaica in 1966. And I think the last of the NIS established schemes in the Caribbean would have been St. Vincent and St. Kitts. Now, the PRG never intended to remove pension rights for public workers. The first 10 people's laws, which were proclaimed in 1983, one of them, People Law number 9, made the point that all pension rights and pension benefits of public officers are preserved. In 1983, when the law was passed, you will observe that it did not affect the pension rights of anyone who was in the service. What it said is that persons who joined the service, anyone joining the service after April the 4th, 1983, the date of the NIS, will be disqualified from receiving pensions under the old Pension Act. So in other words, anyone who was in the service on April 4th, 1983, the pension rights were not interfered by the Disqualification Act. What is disqualification? Sorry, you asked the question.
No. I'm confused by this because if you have a pension disqualification act, it would appear to me that you would have been invalidating that previous law that existed. I mean,
no, but it did not disqualify or invalidate the pension benefits and the pension entitlements of persons who were in the service up until that time.
Okay, but my question to you is, why was that law still retained on the books if you had that new law, that people's laws, as you talk about?
And it was
not repealed?
It was retained precisely because it was never the intention to abolish pension rights for public workers. Those who were there already, the pension rights were preserved under the 1958 Act. Because you brought in NIS and the recognition, and it was recognized that a new scheme had to be established for persons joining the service after April 4th, 1983, Section 47 of the Act specifically stated that the minister had the authority to establish a new scheme for public workers. And that is the new scheme that would have applied to workers joining, to public work officers joining the service after 4th of April, 1983. Like every other employee in Grenada, those who joined the service before 1983 and those who joined the service after 1983 would have been entitled to the NIS. The NIS was for everyone. It was recognized that those who joined the service after the 4th of April, 1983, the NIS would not have satisfied the expectations in terms of receiving pension. And what they would have been receiving from the NIS would not have been comparable with someone who would have been in the service prior to April 4th, 1983. So you could have had the absurd situation of one person joining 3rd April 1983, one person joining 5th April 1983, and they having different pension rights. Section 47 of the Act was put in there because you needed to have a cutoff point. So Section 47 of the Act was put in there so that the minister could establish a new scheme for all workers joining after a certain date. Nothing was done after 1983, and as you know, the revolution came to an end. The revolution imploded, and nothing was done after 1983.
Okay.
What would have,
yes, please.
I was just saying, the lawmakers in 1983 would have recognized that, listen, somebody joining the service on the 4th of April 1983, you basically had a gap. 10 years in some cases for teachers, 26 years for public servants. You basically had that breathing space to put something in place. Of course, the revolution, if it had survived, would have done it much earlier. And that is why the problem only really emerged in 2009, when public workers who joined the service in 1983 were now reaching pension age, and they realized that they were at a serious disadvantage. And that is why then the pressure started to build on the government of the day and on subsequent governments. But I just want to say again, the answer to your question, the PRG never intended to get rid of pension rights for public officers. That is why the 1958 law was not repealed. A. B. That is why Section 47 was put in the NIS Act, so that there would have been a private scheme for public workers in addition to the National Insurance Scheme, so that all public workers who joined the service after 4th of April 1983 would not have been in a disadvantageous position as compared to those who joined before.
Okay, and let me bring in the actuary again, because I know that you have to run, so thank you for staying with us. But if you were to offer advice, say, to the government of Grenada, and again, I want to preface this question by making the point that you are here in your private independent consultancy capacity, because you do run a consultancy. In looking at the numbers, in looking at the data, and in looking at the atmospherics with respect to what the public servants are demanding, what would you propose, or what would you advise, given the current fiscal situation of the country?
Let me tread lightly here.
Yes.
I would say that I believe in a new scheme, personally. I do think there's ways that you can help employees get better retirement accounts. Like, for instance, one of the ways I try to contribute back to Grenada is to encourage people to invest their own money and their own savings in the stock market and different very more highly accretive markets. That's pretty easy to get into, and you get like 10% returns year over year. So with that background of me being in asset management, because along with being an actuary, I spent the first half of my career working in asset management and doing a lot of investment management. And to me, I don't know if you ever heard of a 401k plan, but that's kind of an approach that they use in the United States. Everybody who...
Correct. They use that approach in the United States, but that cannot be applicable to Grenada or the Eastern Caribbean. It's not, they don't have the same capacity. Surely you have the Eastern Caribbean Securities Exchange, but I do not know that they have the capacity to be able to have public workers invest in that kind of scheme.
Well, this is where I personally think you might be wrong, because so like if you look at United Emirates and all these big countries who have a lot of money, they have a lot of Saudi money, they have big pension funds and stuff like that. A lot of these pension funds still invest in the United States stock market. There's ways to still, as an international fund invest in the United States and invest in the stock market. Almost every huge retirement plan around the world is in one shape or form invested in the US stock exchange. And if not that, they have also international stock exchange. The UK is a big one as well. The Europe stock exchange is also a big one. So these funds can invest overseas. There's a way to do it. I know that we think we're small and it's not applicable to us, but there is a way to do it. But even besides, if you don't want to invest in the stock market per se, what I'm thinking is the same 401k approach, which is basically you contribute and then the returns get back to you, which is done with a lot of private schemes here, right? So you could have an element of that where maybe you workers alike and the government can put away a certain fraction of maybe another 1%, etc., into this fund where they can go away with, because to me, the biggest contention seems to be the 25% gratuity. And this is a way they can walk away with a lump sum that they have contributed to. I do think it's a huge burden on the government to try to pay off huge gratuity payments right now. Like, I remember when I did some work, it was about to be like 5 times or something what they usually pay off. If I recall correctly. So it is a big burden on the government, but I feel like if you design a new scheme that has a kind of a 401k approach where you could literally walk with your contributions after when you retire, and I'm not saying the entirety of your contributions, but I do think is maybe just you just put away a fraction of the money. Say like, okay, you're contributing 11% to NIS today, then the 2% you could contribute a little extra 2%, or maybe take some of that 11% and put it in a fund that grows. And then I would advise a stock account in the United States that I tell you grows 10% year over year on average for the last 50 years. Get a high accretive fund like that, or even like some type of bonds or securities, you could get high returns, but have somebody manage that properly in NIS with the right expertise, but basically make them have this fund that allows them to walk away with a lump sum payment, which from hearing the unions, tend to be their concern with the gratuity payments. So, I mean, that would be my only suggestion off the top of my head right now, is to find a way to designate some funds that work with the market, that basically you take it as you leave it, because for instance, the United States stock market, this has been a really great year for it. But 2 years ago, when the pandemic hit, maybe it wasn't that good. Well, actually, the stock market did well in the pandemic overall. It dropped a huge bit, but it came right back up. But let me say, go back to 2008 when we had the financial crisis. The funds were low. So if you're in a fund like this and the funds are low, you could also have a period where maybe you don't have to take the money out this year. You could take it out in 5 years when the economy recovers. So there's a different way, and to me, there's a lot of different ways that you could go about trying to get this lump sum payment that the unions are looking for. And I do think that, because I've seen the numbers myself, that the government has a big task if they were to just try to give out a gratuity payment today. But I do think there's a way to try to help the unions get this lump sum payment like they want, but you would have to be, to me, as Mr. Lane, I think, said,
correct,
a new design on the pension for the private sector. I mean, for the public workers. And this is
so you're saying it is possible. You're saying that there is a workable solution there, but there is a caveat that the unions have to be cognizant of.
Yes. I mean, there are caveats, and I do, go back to the table, see if you could figure out another approach. I think people need to listen to each other. I think you may find something that could work. But that's just my suggestion off the top of my head, is to maybe allow people to contribute 1%, 2% more, and let that go into a higher creative fund. And then you get to walk away with whatever that accumulates over your 30 years, which 10% year over year is pretty high at 30 years. Like in 10 years, you double your money. You can imagine what happens in 30 years.
Right. Okay, Ms. Maguire, thank you so much for appearing on the Bubb Report. I know that you have to run, but I will be back with the rest of the panel. Stand by, folks. We will be right back.
Thank you.
So it's not a legal schooling. I know you're sensitive to people schooling you on the law, but I think I can trump you when it comes to the history of Grenada.
What you're saying is that this resignation was expected? Would it be fair to say that you abdicated your responsibility by not showing up in Parliament on Friday?
We are not aware of the terms of the agreement.
But then how can you say the terms are not favorable? You don't know the terms.
We love old talk, we love gossip, we love brango, we love all them kind of things in the Caribbean. If I cannot play music, I don't know how I'm gonna live.
We are borrowing money to pay debt because of corruption, waste, and mismanagement.
That they have difficulty with your leadership. Why then are you contesting the presidency? Welcome back, folks, and we will get back to the rest of the panel and audience. We do welcome your questions, and at this time I will be taking some comments from the audience. I think Mr. Brand Grimes, he's saying here, so in essence, the old pension remained intact. Gemma Bain Thomas is saying, but the new scheme was never established. There is no order to the fact. Patricia O'Neill Alexander is saying, pension is still intact, but only the politicians that wants to benefit from hard labor. Sue Patrice is asking, as NNP has been the majority government since after April 4th, 1983, is there a draft private pension scheme on the table? Gemma Bain responds by saying, any new scheme has to be in the future. Grimes comes back and says, Dr. Bubb, it is important to note that the new cutoff date, according to the warped interpretation of government, is 22nd of February, 1985. Let's see. We have another WhatsApp question, and I think that one is directed to you, Mr. Lane. I'm going to bring you in here. The viewer is asking, kindly ask about being employed prior to 1983 in another government capacity and getting your years of service joined. I don't know that you have any thoughts on that question.
Well, the government has a policy of if there's a break in your service of 5 years or less, they will join it. So, for example, if you were employed with the government of Grenada, let's say up until 1978, you did 10 years, and there was a break in the service, let's say between 17 and 82, and then after that you again were re-employed and you did another 16 years, they will join the service after 82 to the service prior to 17 so that you'll get the pension. There's a policy, I understand, that they don't join it if the break is more than 5 years. Mm-hmm. But that's policy, okay. Right? So I think that's the issue of the break in the service.
Okay, and let me bring in Ms. Hazard and Teacher Jude, the president of the union here. Lady and gentlemen, have you lost trust in the administration to deliver its promise? Now, according to Minister Oliver Joseph, who, by the way, was invited to appear on the program, we also invited Sir Lawrence Joseph to appear, who wrote extensively on this matter, who is sympathetic to the government's position, but because of his role as acting Governor General, it would be breach of protocol for him to appear. Ordinarily, he would have appeared. Now, according to Minister Joseph in 2019, the unions, the public sector unions, have agreed on a pension of 70% for public officers, which would be a top-up of the pension paid by the NIS scheme, right? Which ranges from 30 to 58%, but can reach a maximum of 60%. And so what I'm going to do, I will queue up a clip from the Prime Minister again from 2019 where he's making this very point. Let's watch this.
And I feel comfortable that we will resolve it.
But while the union is sticking to their 25%, you are far below that. I mean, and they seem bent on...
well, if you're negotiating, you don't stick to one particular number. Negotiations is what it says. Negotiations, and the government has moved, and for the trade unions, leadership must also move. The government position is based on facts. That is what it's supposed to be. It's not based on emotionalism and what one thinks he should get. So we are in negotiation, our team is working, and the government is supporting the process. So hopefully we'll see an end to this not long from now.
Can I ask you, sir, what is the justifiable reason why 25% can't be paid?
Well, we have been already indicated, and we gave the data, though. This is not news now. We gave the data to show exactly what the situation is, how it will affect the fiscal situation and hurt the country. And in fact, in providing the numbers, we've given the opportunity to the leadership of the trade union and any experts that they have to view.
Now, Ms. Hazard and Mr. Bartholomew, the data doesn't lie. Now, you may accuse the Prime Minister of waffling on the Memorandum of Understanding, but the data doesn't lie. What say you?
Before we go into that there, because
Yes.
you're a bit jumping the gun. And we were at the backstage there and kind of hungry to come in when the actual was speaking. So you have questions, but you're not giving us a chance to respond.
Well, well, because she had to leave, but you have the chance now. You have the platform. Go ahead.
We want our time to get the record straight. So I think first thing I would want to say that what the actuary did say there is not the law. So the actuary could say in terms of we respect what she says, but that is not the law. And so the actuary should also talk about the politicians in terms of only when it comes to the worker, only when it comes to teachers and public officers that we are straining the country financially. What's about the politicians who take their own pension? So one can safely say and ask the question, if the NS was the rightful pension for everybody and public officers, why didn't the politicians take it for themselves? Why is it that they pass a new law to get pension for themselves? Some of the politicians, they get the 1958 pension. Some of them still get the NS pension, and then they still, to add insult to injury, go and pass a law after 2 terms. How can you justify that when you have a public officer and a teacher working for 26 and 2/3 years? That's the law. So in other words, if the government and the NS, whoever, did not do what they were supposed to do, the law says that yes, you can abolish the pension, but you must make something and put something in place equal to or better than what you had before. And they never did anything about that. And if you go back to the Marquin's case, the judge spoke about it. That's the reason why the judge has to resort to the 1958 pension in terms of to give him his pension. So that doesn't have to do, and let's be clear here. The public officers in Grenada are the lowest paid in the OECS and in the Caribbean. And there is a sort of gentleman's agreement. That is the reason for that. The reason for that, yes, you are paid low, but you are expected at the end of your retirement basically to get a pension. And you're talking about gratuity, and it's expensive on the public purse, the consolidation fund, which basically our taxpayers that pay the taxes to pay the politicians. The politicians, every time a new election is called, the very said politicians, they get $80,000 or $60,000 every time. So if election coming around again, they're getting the opportunity to get another 60 or 80,000 besides all the perks and the benefits that they get in addition to that. So don't add insult to injury to us and tell us, well, basically the actuary report every time is for the working man and woman of this country. Government try to push actuary reports, all kind of financial statement, and when it comes to the working man, and still to add insult to injury, 2 terms they make in office and they are getting a pension. They are getting it. Some persons who make 1 term already, and if they're ready to retire, they ensure that they get the political pension. And while persons are working basically at low salary for how many years, 30-something years, 40 years, and so many years, and you're going home empty-handed, the law is the law. And basically, we are going on this situation. If you're talking about what government tried to do with the Memorandum of Understanding, they still didn't have the common courtesy to give persons gratuity. So you tell me all the and 10% the government wants to put on that is still less than the 1958 pension, while everybody else getting the full pension and the gratuity. And you saying to add insult to injury, if a teacher, for example, retires at 26 and 2/3 years, you have to wait until 60 years or what the case may be, or 61 years or whatever, to get this NS and to get whatever government saying that they are producing to us. So what would happen? There are so many persons who will retire right now and they cannot even get their special pension. They cannot even get, so you have to wait. You started working young, let's say at the age of 18 or 20, and you reach basically your 26 and 2 years at the age of 50 or 55, and you're just struggling all over the place, and you have to wait until 60 for NS. So what we want to make clear here, this is a clear injustice, and the 1958 pension should be restored to bring back justice, parity, and equality for all workers of this country, including teachers and public officers. So don't talk about how they call it, reports. Don't talk about the actuarial report and all those things in a void, because that is conveniently used just for the workers and teachers and public officers. And remember, we are the lowest paid. Where are we going to get money to come back and match fund, or what the case will be? Take into effect, some persons would have had the pension before, and what happened to click on all these places and them, these things, and them, some people financially they have a problem because they never got it. And when you work with government, that's the law. When you work with government, you should be able to get your pension, divide from the NS, just as people from harbors and other places, they have the pension, they pay NS too, and they get a NS pension. NS pension is a contributory scheme for all persons. So I don't
let me bring in Daisy, because you also wanted to jump in here from the Public Workers Union.
It is quite a lot to say. And I suppose it all can't be said here, but let me see if I can make some logical progression and reason with it. One, we are ruled and governed by a constitution, the 1958 Constitution. That constitution, which was made under an associated governorship, when we did not even have a constitution in the post-colonial era, even at that time, persons understood, the framers of the Constitution understood that when persons work, they should receive something in their old age so that they can continue to live, at least a basic standard. That was 1958. We are here in 2021 debating whether or not a public servant, after working 40 years, or 26 years, or 36 years, or any number of years with government, attaining the age of 60, should receive a pension. And that is sickening. It is frightening and sickening that in our country today, this is the debate. The debate today should be that all persons, every Grenadian citizen, whether you work publicly, whether you work privately, whether you were self-employed, and attaining the age of 60, you should receive something from government to see you through your senior years. There is very little provision in this society for persons who are called seniors. They have to pay the same taxes. They pay the same VAT. They pay the same bus fares. Gas prices, alarmingly, I don't know if all of us know in Grenada, I think today gas has gone up to $16.38. If a senior person, a retired person goes to the gas station, they have to pay that same price as those of us who are younger and earning. And so it is unconscionable and sickening that at this time, 2021, this is the debate. And it is sickening that you have a government who has presided over this debate for the last 20 years and has done nothing about it. And let us be clear that between 1995 and now, we have had one change in administration, I think 2008 to 2013. And from 1995 to now, it's a cumulative period of 21 years. We have had the NNP party forming the administration of Grenada. And we've seen, you played all the clips where so many times they have said, yes, workers should receive a pension, and we have to find a way to do it. So this is not a new debate. This conversation has not started today. A minute ago, you asked, what about the data? What data? Prime Minister Mitchell in the clip that you played referred to data. What data? The data is convenient to the government, to the administration, to the Prime Minister, depending on when they are talking about it. When it is prior to, post, just before elections, it's a narrative, it's a different kind of a data. When elections have come and gone, you hear about data and you hear we can't afford to pay them. Pensions and gratuity can't be paid with sand. When parliamentarians receive gratuity and pension, it's not paid with sand, it's paid with money. And every country, any modern society, any civilized society must prepare itself to look after senior persons, to look after elders who have made their contribution. And so the actuary is right when she has said, there's something could be done and should be done. But Dr. Bubb, all of those discussions have been happening since 2008. If we go on the website of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, we would see that in 2008, Sir Dwight Venner, then governor, commissioned an inquiry into pensions and schemes in the Eastern Caribbean sub-region. That Grenada was at the forefront of that because we seem to be one of the islands that has no pension plan, sustainable pension plan for public workers. You had in 2011, there was a national symposium. Recommendations were done. You had actuarial studies were done. So this is not new. The government of today, right now, has known from way back then that the pension matter is on the table. And even if you were to talk about even if you were to say, okay, forget about 1958, but how can we? Because our constitution was restored when the revolution failed. We are still governed by our 1973 constitution, and that constitution provides a pension. But even if you were to look at the NIS Act, 45, Section 45, which made a disqualification, you have Section 46, which said that a new scheme and a new regime should have been put in place that does not cause a civil servant or a worker to go home with any less of a pension than the 1958 law would have afforded them. So where is the premise for government? What is a legal premise? You mentioned earlier that, Mr. Larry Joseph or Sir, whatever, I don't want to misquote his title, is on the side of government. Certainly he will be. You've had persons in this society who have not had the struggles that the ordinary working man has had. They've been cushy and in bed with the government. They're okay, they're looked after. But the ordinary worker, I met a worker in Grenville yesterday who said to me, Miss Hazard, I gave this country 26 years. I went to a cake sale yesterday. A teacher who served this country for 36 years and 4 months retired early because she's too sick to work. And when she retired, she's not yet 60, but she has kidney problems. She's on dialysis, and today she went home with no money, 36 years and 4 months, and she has to sell cakes in order to look after her medical condition. But she served this country. And are we saying that when people serve our country and they get to their senior years, it's okay? How do they live? How do we as a society expect that these people will live? That's the question we should ask. So the legal arguments are there. You take 1958, you take the NIS Act, it is there. Public servants should receive a pension. But let's talk about the moral arguments. Let's talk about the arguments that says government in 1989, understanding that or believing that the NIS Act disqualified them, introduced a new act in Parliament giving themselves a pension and gratuity. And I want to ask you, Grenadian people, how are you so satisfied that a parliamentarian, every time his election called, can receive a gratuity of between $60,000 to $80,000? And once he makes 2 terms in office, that's about 8 years in our election cycle, will receive a pension for life. He doesn't have to wait until he's 60. He immediately begins to receive that pension. And we are satisfied that that one group of public officers, they can receive a pension, but the rest of us, we are supposed to be buried alive. There are too many public servants who have died with stress just before they retire or immediately attaining the age of 60. There are too many persons who have to be working today sick, but they dare not go home early because they have to ensure that they receive a salary. We can be making room for younger generations of Grenada to have careers in the public service. We can retire early. Persons who are sick are not supposed to be dragging themselves to work just so that they can earn something. A pension benefit should be afforded to them according to the Constitution. And we have had 20 years in between the fall of the revolution and now to deal with this problem. There has been too many studies, too many inquiries, too many recommendations put forward. Labor unions have said, despite our right in the Constitution, we are still willing to put together something that can ensure that persons can even pay into a contributory scheme, but our government has not had the will.
Okay, let me bring in Mr. Lane here. You've been laying in wait, sir. We will get to a break shortly and wrap up the program. But Mr. Lane, if you were asked to provide a set of concrete suggestions to the government of Grenada on how we move forward to get out of this rut, notwithstanding that there would be a legal opinion on this matter. And so we also have to appreciate that this matter is now before the court, which also makes it sub judice. But what proposals would you offer to get us out of this rut?
Well, I don't know if I should venture there, but seeing that you asked, I will say that, well, for one thing, we cannot take back the the 38 years that we have missed out. I think what Ms. Maguire,
yes,
what Ms. Maguire was saying, that it will really be what she was saying. There's a lot of sense in it, and may I say it would be really good if Grenadians overseas, I mean, they give back to the country in terms of ideas and so. I'm certain that if we mobilize our best brains, we can find a way out of that. The fact of the matter is that there's no gainsaying that the pension, the NIS pension for public workers, if that is all that they are getting, that is inadequate. I don't want to repeat myself, but I would say, just to make the point, that was not the intention of the PRG. B, and I believe that as a short-term measure, something should be done, even combining the NIS and something from the government to make sure that the workers are in a much better position, something comparable to what the people who were there from prior to 1983, their situation. But of course, it has to await a legal solution so that everyone knows. I could see this matter going all the way to the Privy Council, so it will take some time. But I really think that some redress in the meantime, some form of settlement pending the outcome of the court, because it's tight times.
But the government would say that they are committed to that settlement. I mean, they put something on the table, which again, I'm going to bring the union folks back. They seem to not be happy with what the government has proposed.
Well, I mean, you always have that in negotiations, but I don't think it's necessary for anybody to tie their hands now. But in the interim, maybe something could be done. The 70% could be put on the table, but being clear that this is just a matter of an interim settlement. But I mean, I understand what the workers are saying in terms of the pension. I don't think anyone could, in good conscience, disagree with that situation, but it is really to find a solution that is workable.
All right, stand by there, folks. We will take one final break and then we will come back to wrap up the program. Stand by.
Since losing that seat, what have you been up to?
Now, Mr. Attorney General, this particular provision sounds unconstitutional. But why were there not consultations before moving forward with the proposals? Did they say what will happen when you guys get to St. Vincent? Because there are pressing socio-economic issues that I would want to address with you. In the hyper-information age of social media, the Bubb Report knows there is more to the story. We have questions and demand answers. We strive to hold the powerful accountable and tell an unbiased, contextual story. You know what happened. We let you know why it happened. There is always more to the story. The Bubb Report, streaming every Sunday at 11 a.m. on Facebook and YouTube. Welcome back, folks. And we also got a comment here from one of our viewers. He said that, remember, every citizen is entitled to NIS, to the National Insurance Scheme benefits. The pension is separate because it's only for government workers. So we also have to be very clear about the distinction between the two. But let us get to some comments before we go to close. Super Teresa is saying the NNP government should just use the pension policy installed for the politicians, for all public servants employed since August 4th, 1984. Margaret Francis is saying, wait a minute, you're telling me that every time there is an election, a parliamentarian gets 80K. Now, this is madness. Is it a one-time payment? Does that mean that a parliamentarian who has been there for multiple election cycles will get 80K at the end of each cycle? So if so, this is real madness. It's high-class robbery. I think what it is, if you serve 2 terms in the parliament, that then makes you entitled to a pension. Let's see. Kinder Williamson is saying, and we're voting them right back. If election is called today or tomorrow, it's another 15-0. Who is voting? We have an election coming up again. We'll see. Let's see. We have. Let's see what other comments we have. Brian Grimes is saying poor implementation on the part of government. They seem to only see 5-year cycles. We need a futuristic and transformative leadership. I'm going to bring in Mr. Bartholomew here for some closing comments. Teacher Jude, any final thoughts from you?
Yes, to say it is painful, it is hurtful. It is a hurtful thing. It's a shame what is happening in Grenada. Basically, what you're seeing is that the government doesn't have the political will to do the right thing. What they do, the calculations that the government makes, they make up calculations that will benefit them politically, not the citizens of this country. So basically what you're seeing is two basically public service. You're seeing one basically with the established workers, and you're seeing a political public service. And these, when you really check to, not to say Grenada doesn't have money to do the right thing, you know, that is where the vast of the monies are going. The government is basically doing well, whether COVID-19 or not. They are making monies and surplus. But what they do basically is a political decision. All this government concentrate on is election time, and they know they want to go back. So they make the political, they spend the money where they want, and certain things that doesn't benefit everybody. And that is unfair, unfortunate, and unreasonable. And what the government, the people of this country must use their head and think. This question about pension is not for NNP and NDC or anybody else, because you have persons over every political divide who are hurt and not getting the pension. What people have to speak and such, and as we say, we go back as workers and other people and put the very said people there, and we don't demand respect, we don't demand that they pay the pension and do the right thing. And unfortunately, when election comes around, we talk, and we do the same thing again, and we continue to hurt. And what we want, we must demand what we want from our government, and we want justice and equality, fairness for all, and we want pension restoration. Yes, everybody must get an equal share of the pie, but the workers who are working for years upon years, you're talking about sick persons who are hurting. You heard what he said, some persons stroke, cancer, all sorts of situations. Some people have to fight to come to work because they make their 26 and 2,000 years and they cannot get a pension. And if this government had conscience from since the restoration of democratic rule in this country, they brought back everything. When the revolution demised, they brought back everything that the Constitution had to offer constitutionally. What did they get rid of? The pension, the 1958 pension. And these people come in and tell us that they love us so much. If you love us so much and you care about us, this government, it seems that they just like to give certain people to be just poor and to be begging on them all the time. And that is wrong, that is unfair. What we are calling on as union and workers of this country, and everybody, every citizen, justice must be done. And this 1958 pension must be restored, and the court will speak because the matter is in the court. So we don't want to go too far with that and go ahead of the court, because justice, it will come from the court. But our cry, and throughout the whole country, is pension restoration. And 70%, 60% from NS government want to give you 10%, which for some people getting a $700 or $600, $250 when they retire. That is pension. That is something that somebody could leave us. And where at the same time they getting all the transportation allowance, gas allowance, this allowance right through. And calculate before I end here. Calculate everybody throughout this country. All the politicians that basically in office for 20 years, 30 years, some of them 25 years, some of them 15 years. Every 5 years or 4 years or 3 years you have elections. You know how many $60,000 or $80,000 these people getting? And still after that they come in and get a pension, they come in and get a political pension and all of our benefits, while we just working hard in this country, working for them and going like slave and then going home empty-handed and hungry. This is hurtful and painful. It is wrong and it must stop and it should stop.
But Mr. Jude, the government would say, well, you essentially I guess skirted their efforts at negotiating. Instead of negotiating, you're taking the matter to court.
No,
what would you say? What would you say to that position?
No. This memorandum of understanding was just a political trickery. That thing was the government didn't do anything about it.
But you agreed to it, though. You agreed to it as public sector unions.
No. We didn't basically. That wasn't in its finality. That was just something that the government basically announced before election as a mamagism. The finality did not come to that. There was no gratuity or anything to that. Where's the gratuity part of that? Where's the gratuity? Everybody else getting the gratuity, and you're telling persons they have to wait until 60 and you still can't get a gratuity. If the government had conscience, wouldn't they have said at least that the workers should get a gratuity, even if they would have brought up that? So all how you turn, the worker get the bitter end of the stick. And that's what we're saying. So it's because they didn't do that, the matter has to go back to the court, because the court, basically the honorable court, should be able to speak justice and restore justice and equality for all the workers of this country. So that's where
all right. And let me bring in Miss Elaine, and then actually I'm going to get Miss Elaine and then Miss Hazard for some closing comments. Miss Elaine.
Okay. All I would like to say is that we clearly have a problem, and I think what we need to be talking solution. Yes, there's a court matter in place, but I think in the interim solutions are maybe useful. But more than that, we have to think long term. And I would say that we really need to, at the end of the day, we will solve this by brain power. And we need to harness all or as much of our brain power as possible to come up with a solution for this problem. And I'm not just speaking Grenadian brain power, because we have the OECS, we have CARICOM, but I think with the OECS we are much more, we are much closer. We all have national insurance schemes, we all have reserves of funds, we all have the probability, as the actuary saying, if we don't find a way of growing these funds, that future generations will face the problem, will face problems. So I really believe that we need to find some way to come together, and some of the ideas that Ms. Maguire put forward today, I could see that as a starting point, and I think that's the way to go. Some kind of sovereign fund, monies which are there that we don't just we don't just spend, we don't just utilize, but we invest long term, investing by people who are professionals in the field, so that we know that we will get steady, stable, and predictable returns, so that we can take care of our people. But I think the problem, there's a legal part to it, A, B, there's an interim part to it, but in the long term, we need to mobilize our brain power so that we can put something in place that will be a lasting solution, or a solution for a very long time. That's all
All right. Yes,
thank you for having me, Kellan.
Absolutely. I will be bringing you back on the anniversary of the revolution. We normally have some revolution programming, and we certainly want to get into the weeds with respect to the book that you wrote. I hope that you'll be writing more, because I don't think that period is extensively covered as it should. So thank you again, Mr. Lane, for appearing on the report. And I'm going to bring in Ms. Hazard of the Public Workers Union for some closing comments. Ms. Hazard, it's over to you.
Good afternoon. My device. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. Right. Wonderful. So I just want to say that this issue that we've discussed today, the issue of public workers not receiving a gratuity and pension, it is a very sad situation that our country is confronting. A lot of the discussion has been held over the last 20 years, and in particular, in the last 10 years or so, recommendations have been made. And I want people to not take my word for it. Go on to the ECCB, Eastern Caribbean Central Bank website, and you'll see Commission of Inquiry there and recommendations made. Go on to www.gov.gd. You would see the commission, the symposium, details of the symposium that was held and paid for by the government of Grenada in July 2011. In 2013, following the general elections in Grenada, Ms. Nadia McIntyre, rest her soul in peace, was appointed as cabinet secretary, and she was supposed to continue the work on behalf of government into assisting in putting things in place to restore that pension. So government cannot come today to take the position that somehow labor unions are unreasonable, and what we are asking is unreasonable, because over the years, every time there is an election cycle, we see that the gimmicks and the games come into play. But what we've seen seriously, the pension issue has been looked into. There has been commission of inquiry set up for it. We have spent money for it. And yes, the matter is before the court today. And that is because after unions were tricked into signing an MOU at 70%.
You were tricked into signing an MOU.
Because
you voluntarily went into signing the MOU.
I have to say trick, Dr. Bob, because we signed an MOU, and you would understand that an MOU is supposed to be an honorable agreement. And we signed an honorable, or what we thought was an honorable agreement with government. But once the election was over and they came into office after March 2018, what we saw the government saying is that what we signed is not what they're agreeing to. And so, yes, there was trickery on the part of government, that what they had signed in black and white, once the elections were over, they were not willing and have still not to this day committed to doing. So yes, we were tricked by a bunch of rogues, by a dishonorable government who knows and understands that the pension must be restored and public officers must be paid a pension. But what they do is talk about it, spend money, throw money behind it, but never at the pensioner, never at the public worker. And so all of the questions have been asked, the recommendations have been made. They are there in the public domain that people can find out for themselves. The recommendation made by the actuary today is another part of the solution, but solutions have been offered. And rather than govern, and the reason why we are in court is because in 2018, the same year when we signed that unfortunate MOU, this is the same year when government docked our salaries, when we realized they had reneged on that honorable understanding and were not willing to pay as they had signed to, and we took to protest, they illegally docked public servant salary. So you took away our property, we protested about it, and you further took away our property. But it cannot continue like this.
As we know, that matter is also in the court as well.
And yes, so that matter is in the court. And so this is why we are in the court. We should not be in the court. Government knows this matter should not be in the court. They are not in court trying to find a pension. And so we are begging and we are asking, have a conscience, have a heart for the people of Grenada who work and sacrifice to build and develop this country and get the pension going. The recommendations have been made. There is no need to reinvent the wheel. The wheels are all there in the public domain, and any Grenadian can go and find that information on the recommendations that have been made by actuaries in the past on the pension and gratuity matter in Grenada. And we will continue this struggle until workers get justice, because it's our legal and just cause.
Okay, that was Daisy Hazard, who is the Public Relations Officer of the Grenada Public Workers Union. I also thank Mr. Jude Bartholomew, Teacher Jude, the president of the Grenada Union of Teachers. Mr. Bartholomew, congratulations to the Croce Roman Catholic School, who've done very well in the common entrance exams, as well as to my alma mater, the Primrose RC School as well. I say that the teachers of Grenada, especially at Primrose, I always say this, my foundation teachers made me helped to shape the person I am today. So I'm grateful to the educators of Grenada for that work. Jude?
Thank you very much. We do appreciate it. Wonderful.
Yes, and Mr. Lane as well. Thank you again. Panel, thank you to my previous guests. Thank David Rudder and the professor from Trinidad and Tobago in paying tribute to Brother Resistance. And folks, listeners and viewers, thank you as usual for your spirited participation. As a reminder, this program is aired as a condensed repeat broadcast on the Grenada Broadcasting Network in Grenada on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. So if you have not had the opportunity to catch the program today, you can certainly catch it on GBN. On behalf of the producers of the Bubb Report, we thank you for joining us for another week of great programming. I'm Dr. Kellen Bubb. Have a great week ahead. Bye-bye.